This is the story of 3 disturbing encounters with the same man. Let's not make it 4. I was 15 years old at the time and out to a weekend afternoon movie with my friend. We were really early, so we decided to take a look around a nearby toy store to kill some time before the previews began. I was strolling absent-mindedly down the aisle by myself, looking at toys I felt far too old for, when I heard an odd whistle. If you've ever heard the iPhone notification chime, then you have an idea of the sound I heard. I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was someone's phone and moved through the aisles, eventually meeting back up with my friend. We walked around a bit more, talking and laughing, and I heard that whistle once again. Being preoccupied with my conversation more than anything, I still didn't pay it any mind. On our way out of the store, I heard the whistle for a third time, but much closer, practically right over my shoulder, and I whipped around mid-sentence. A man stood there, grinning from ear to ear in a strangely sinister way. The smile didn't fully reach his eyes. He was a bit on the small side, scraggly with long hair tied back in a low ponytail. He had on a tattered black t-shirt which hung loosely off his thin frame and a bulging black drawstring backpack.
"Hi,"
he said, stretching his lips even wider around his contrastingly bright white teeth. As a teenage girl, I was no stranger to the attention of older men, but something about his persona and approach set me on edge. Still, I was taught to be polite. "Hi," I responded tentatively, taking a step backwards and away from his intense stare.
"I've noticed you around the store and thought I could get your opinion on something."
He unfurls a crumpled, stained copy of the toy store's weekly ad and pointedly stabs at the Barbie doll selection with his index finger.
"See, I'm looking for the perfect doll for my niece, and I just have no idea which one to pick. What do you think?"
He looks up and smiles, but his eyes are dark pools of nothingness, devoid of any real interest. "This one's nice," I say, pointing to a doll at random, hardly looking at the ad.
"Wow, thank you. I really appreciate that. Hey, has anyone ever told you how pretty you are? You must go to the gym often. What gym do you go to?"
Taken aback by his abrupt stream of rehearsed-sounding pickup lines, I say thank you and force a laugh. I'm young, and so is my friend. Our inexperience and his strange approach keeps us frozen in place. His eyes bore only into mine, and his grin, wider, still deeply disconcerting, never fades from his face.
"Hey, do you want to be friends? I'd like very much to be friends with you. You know what friends do. They take pictures together. Let's take a picture together, since we're friends."
He holds up a red flip phone with the front cover held together by a rubber band. He activates the front-facing camera, and before I can say anything, he leans into me, face uncomfortably close, and snaps the picture. He looks at it briefly, smiles, and pockets his phone.
"There now, we're friends,"
he says, matter-of-factly, and turns his gaze back to me appraisingly. Stupidly, in a horrified daze, I nod.
"So, where are you from? Where are you going after this? What do you like to do?"
My friend puts her hand on my arm, and I suddenly break from my stupor. "We have to go. My dad's waiting," I say, and we turn to go. My last, but not final, glimpse of him is with his head cocked to the side and that wide smile spread across his face. His eyes now flicker with something I can only recall as amusement. We turn our backs, and as soon as we get far enough away, we run. Fast forward to a year and a half later. I'm in my junior year of high school, and on the early morning city bus headed to my first class of the day. The bus is packed, and I squeeze my way on the back, reaching out a hand to grab the pole as the bus brakes sharply. I hear a whistle close to my ear. When I hear it again, I adjust my earbuds in my ears. Why isn't that person answering their phone? A hand closes right above mine on the pole. It is too close and our fingers brush, but the person holds their hand there almost intentionally. I move my hand and glance up and into the broad smile of the creepy man from the toy store. Cold chills shoot down my spine and I grip the pole even harder until my knuckles turn white. He tilts his head, still smiling his toothy grin, and says,
"Hi, friend."
The bus is so jam-packed that there's nowhere else for me to go, so I turn my body as far away from him as possible, hoping that playing dumb would work in my favor and he would go away. He leans closer still and says,
"Hi. Do you remember me?"
I shake my head no and lean as far away as I can in the tight space. He frowns and looks suddenly angry.
"No. I know you. We met before. We're friends."
I shake my head again, looking down, pretending to be engrossed in my music player. Maybe if he didn't get a full look at my face, he might think he had me confused with someone else.
"No. I have your picture."
He says, and reaches into his drawstring bag, pulling out his red flip phone, held together by frayed rubber bands. All the while, I'm thinking, if he sees me get off at the stop at my school, he'll know where I am every day, and can easily find me. But if I get off at a random stop before my school, he could get off with me, and I have no idea where else to go. He's still scrolling through his phone, and I'm imagining all the other girls' pictures he might have on there when he asks,
"So, what school do you go to?"
I think about saying mind your own business, but remember his angry frown from before and give him the name of another school. It doesn't really make sense because the bus only goes past one high school and not the other one I told him, but he nods at this and says,
"Hold on. I have your picture here somewhere. We're friends."
The bus pulls up to my high school and there's nothing else I can do but get off. While he's still preoccupied with his phone, I lose myself in the crowd and run all the way to school. I'm shivering when I get to my first period classroom, and I can hear the blood rushing in my ears. I ask my boyfriend to take the bus with me every morning for the next few weeks, and I change my route going to and from, but I don't see him again until 2 years later, and I'm a sophomore in college. I'm taking the bus home alone after a late night out with friends when I hear a weird whistle. Enough time has passed that I don't feel much alarm and exit the bus at my stop. It is completely dark out, and I'm one of 2 people who get off. Then, from behind me, I hear,
"Hello there. Do you remember me?"
I turn around, and it's him again. It's hard to make out his features in the dark, but I instantly remember the tone of his voice, recall the whistle, the tilted head, and the wide-toothed smile. I see what looks like a backpack strapped to the front of his chest. "No," I say, and I start walking faster, heart racing, wondering how fast I can run in these flip-flops. I hear him picking up speed behind me, and I dare to glance back. I glimpse him starting to run at me, his hands in his backpack, digging around for something that I don't want to know. He's angry now, smile gone, and he shouts at me.
"So, you want to be that way?"
I start running and don't stop until I get home. So, to the whistling man with the backpack, no, I do not want to be your friend. Let's not meet again. I live in Florida, And this incident happened about 3 weeks after Hurricane Irma, so not that long ago. Back in July, the ex and I had just finalized the divorce, and I moved into a gated neighborhood where every house was rented out by the same rental company/landlords. It's a very small neighborhood with about 15 houses tops. All 15 houses are bordered around a man-made lake, with the backyards facing the lake. No one really has a fenced backyard. When you walk out your back door, you see the lake in front of you and your neighbors' backyards on each side of you. Everyone in the neighborhood seemed very close. Someone was always hosting a family-friendly party barbecue or having people over to watch sports. I am still depressed about my divorce, so I never partook in these social gatherings. The only person I got to know was my next-door neighbor, Steve, an active Navy soldier with a huge love for guns. Steve is the true hero of this nightmare. My daughter Alice is 4 years old, and I get her every weekend. Alice's bedroom window faces the backyard towards the lake. I spoil that girl to death. She truly is my everything, and I count down the days to the weekend every week just to be with her. That's why I was upset when Irma came and I had to go almost 3 weekends without seeing her. The weekend before the storm, she was with her mom. Then, obviously, the weekend of the storm, she was with her mom. Then, on top of that, the weekend after, she had to be with her mom because my power was still out. No AC in Florida is miserable. The humidity was so bad that week that I slept in my daughter's room the whole week because she has the only room with a window that faced the lake. I opened the window, exposing just the window screen, so the wind from the lake could cool the room as much as possible while I slept. Eventually, the power comes back and Alice starts visiting me again like normal. That was when the nightmares started. My daughter would complain about the singing lady and how she doesn't like her anymore. I thought maybe she was referring to one of my ex's friends, or one of the teachers at her school. Maybe there was a teacher at her school that sang to the kids that she didn't like. That Saturday night, Alice woke up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder. I ran into her room and turned on the light, and found her hiding under her covers. I asked her what was wrong, and all she could do was point to an empty corner of her room and say, "Look, look." There was nothing there. She was acting as if she saw a ghost. After I calmed her down, she started to talk about the singing lady again. "Please tell the singing lady not to come back. Please, Daddy. Make her go away. Obviously, she is having nightmares, right?" I showed her that there was nothing in the closet, and nothing under the bed, and that there was nothing to be afraid of. She calmed down and went back to sleep. I went back to my room and quickly fell back asleep. It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes before Alice comes running back into my room, screaming, "She's back! She's back!" Alice absolutely refused to go back to her room, so I let her sleep with me. The next morning, Sunday morning, I took Alice out to breakfast and we stopped by Target to pick up a baby monitor. I haven't used one since her mom and I were still married, but I wanted to easily be able to hear her if and when she started having these nightmares again, so I could respond quicker. After I set them up, I showed Alice how they worked to give her assurance that I could hear her and she was safe. That night, she slept soundly and didn't make a peep all night. The following weekend, Alice had to stay with her mother again because she caught a stomach virus from one of her little friends at school. It was Saturday night and I was sound asleep in my bed. Around 2 a.m. is when I heard it. A woman's voice humming a soft nursery rhyme through the baby monitor. The humming and soft singing got louder and clearer as the voice got closer to the monitor. I wasn't dreaming. I could hear a woman softly singing lullabies in my daughter's bedroom. I had never been so scared and dumbfounded in my life. I was feeling a mixture of pure terror and disbelief. Then the voice spoke out.
Alice, sweetie, are you awake?
Adrenaline shot through my veins. I jumped out of bed and locked my door. I picked up my cell phone and called Steve from next door. He didn't waste a second. As soon as I got off the phone with him, I heard him storm out of his back door screaming,
Don't you fucking move.
I ran outside and found him aiming his shotgun at a woman crouched outside my daughter's window, the one that I had left open after Irma and never closed. Steve quickly dropped his guard when he recognized the woman. It was Jean, the neighborhood maintenance man/woman. Steve's wife came running out after him and confirmed it was her. Jean played dumb, said she was not singing, and didn't even know my daughter's name. She said she was near my daughter's window because she was doing her weekly patrol for gators and thought she saw one approach our house from the lake. Bull fucking shit. This bitch was singing, and she called out to my daughter by name. Yes, it's true that there have been a few gator spottings around the neighborhood. And yes, part of Jean's job was to patrol the lake at night every now and then. But at 2 a.m., I obviously knew it was bullshit, and even though neither Steve nor his wife called her out on it, I could tell from the look on their faces that they didn't believe her either. The next morning, I went over to Steve's house to thank him and tell him exactly what happened. He told me that Jean and her husband have been known to be a little cuckoo, but this is by far the craziest thing that has happened so far. Steve helped me install metal bars on Alice's window that afternoon. A bit of context first. My cat likes to go outside every day. In the morning, he follows us to the door, takes the elevator down with us, and then goes about his day outside until we bring him back home again in the evening. Now, my cat isn't the most punctual guy, so it's pretty common for him to stay out much later in the neighborhood, sometimes well into the night or for several days. Or he gets bored and doesn't play for more than 2 hours and wants to come back inside. The problem is that we're not home, so he just has to wait. My family and I live in an apartment on the first floor, so my cat's solution is to sit on one of the balconies and meow at the top of his lungs to get our attention. When we're home, it works perfectly fine, but when we're not, it's a lot less effective. So, our solution was to gently ask our neighbors that have the key to our apartment to bring him up so he doesn't have to wait outside all day. Those that don't have the key sometimes let him into the building so he's not literally outside. For example, when it's raining. Our apartment is a bit special because it's bigger than the others, so to get inside there are 2 ways when you get to the main hall. 1. Take the stairs to the left and open the door that has 2 locks. And 2. Use the elevator with the special key that goes directly inside our apartment, and the door only has 1 lock. The cat is used to the second option, and me too because we're both lazy. But when the neighbors that don't have the key let him inside the building, he goes up the stairs and waits. Since I usually use the elevator from the parking 2 floors below, that means I don't see him waiting in the hall, and he meows outside my door to get me to open up for him, or my mom, or my dad. All around we have our habits with my parents and neighbors, and it works fairly well. Now you know how everything goes with my little guy. Anyways, here's what happened a while ago. My parents like the outdoors very much, so I'm usually left alone in the weekends. Generally, it means taking care of the chores and inviting my friends over so we can have the apartment to ourselves, which is pretty nice. This time, I was alone. It was late, 11 p.m.-ish, and I was just chilling in the living room before hearing meowing over the sound of the TV. Someone let my cat in the building, and he's waiting outside the door. I took my keys and started opening the first lock. I don't know about other pet owners, but I know my cat's meow by heart. It's a kind of rising meow that's very high-pitched and very cute, and that also has a specific rhythm, because I've been hearing it nearly every day for 5 years. So I stopped. The noise isn't what it usually is. It's too deep and just off. This isn't my cat outside my door, and he's the only cat around that knows that he has to wait by the door and scream to be let in. By that point, I had stopped halfway through opening the door and waited to hear him again and noticed scratching. My cat never scratches. At that point, I'm super weirded out by the situation, but the meowing is getting super loud, and I didn't want my neighbors to be woken up, so I continued with my key, but suddenly, I heard another noise that freaked me out. A cough. For the record, I am not a very cautious person, and in my whole 21 years of living in this apartment, I must have looked through the peephole a total of maybe 5 times, but a small part of my brain told me to do it that night, and thank God I did. I let go of my keys and put my eye against the door, and saw it. A man standing there, fucking meowing in front of my door. To say that I was terrified is really an understatement, but my heart stopped. I just stood there petrified for what felt like an hour. I don't really know how long it took for me to move again, but eventually my body just took over, I guess. I did what you'd expect, ran for my phone, stood in the corner of the living room, and called the police. By the time they came, there was nobody in front of the door. I can't even remember when the meowing stopped, and they just took my testimony before telling me to be cautious and left. To this day, I still don't know what that meowing guy wanted. I'm not sure that I want to, anyway. I also don't know how he got inside the building, since you needed a key to access it, and how he knew that I would open the door if he imitated my cat in front of it. At least I will be careful from now on. And my cat eventually came back since then. He's sleeping in my bed as I'm writing this. Many years ago, before kids, rescue animals, a mortgage, and a husband, I was a travel writer in Europe. I did most of my trips alone. This story is about the first time I visited Prague. I'd never been to Prague, and the trip was last minute, so I had little time to prepare. My travel partner had dumped me in another country, and I was determined to make the best out of the trip by visiting a place I'd never been. Upon arrival at the train station, I visited the accommodation office and asked for a hostel not far from the center. In my early 20s, winging it was part of the fun. These days, I'm far less adventurous. The hostel they sent me to was a sprawling, crumbling, slate-gray Art Deco building on a nondescript street about a 10-minute walk to the Stair Mesto. The inside was probably beautiful at one time, but by the time I checked in, it was full of shabby, mismatched furniture and cheap, stained carpet. Most of the light fixtures were broken, leaving everything but the lobby dark and gloomy. It smelled of standing water and dust. I found my room, a double for $12 a night, and made note of the fact that I had a roommate. She wasn't there, but on her side of the room there was a suitcase, a dress neatly folded across the back of a plastic chair, a scattering of makeup containers on the beat-up desk, and a stack of German fashion magazines on the bed. As I had no plans or goals on this impromptu trip, I spent the afternoon exploring Old Town Square, the Jewish Quarter, and Wenceslas Square. I purchased some Czech crystals for my mom and painted eggs from a street vendor for myself. I also made reservations for a sunset dinner cruise for one. At around 6 p.m., I returned to my room to shower, change clothes, and unload my purchases. When I left my room about an hour later, there was no indication that my roommate had returned at any point during the day. After the cruise, I stopped at a tiny bar on Tanksa and had a glass of wine. I'd heard horror stories about the dangers of Prague, but I felt no more trepidation than I did in any other large city. Sure, the cobblestone streets, fog rolling off the Vltava, backlit Gothic architecture, and winding alleys made me think of Jack the Ripper and Dracula, but in a good way. It was nearly midnight when I'd returned to my hostel, so I was surprised to find that my roommate still hadn't returned. That wasn't uncommon, though. Backpackers are a fickle lot. She could have gone on a short overnight trip and just left her stuff behind, hooked up with a guy or girl, and was holed up at their place, or hanging out at another hostel. So, I was surprised, but not concerned. I took another shower before bed, however, and was surprised to find that things in the room had changed in my return. Her bed was neatly turned down, the magazines had moved to the nightstand, and the dress was gone. The strangest thing, though, was the addition of a pink silky nightgown spread across the bed. My bed. Maybe she thought she still had the room to herself. I didn't see how. My shopping bags, clothes, and toiletries were in plain view. I gently moved her nightgown over to her bed and then settled in for the night as I wrote in my journal. I assumed she was in the shower or somewhere nearby, so I expected her to return shortly. After about an hour, though, her side was still empty. I needed to use the restroom before I went to sleep, so I made one last trip down the hall. The building was unusually quiet. There wasn't the regular sounds of chatty backpackers, the clinking glasses, or the music that would normally leak through the walls. There was nothing. It was hushed like a church after the congregation had left. I found myself practically tiptoeing back. My room was near the end of the hall, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the corridor was darker than before. The few working lights were blinking as they struggled to stay lit, and it reminded me of a funhouse. A tightness began to fill in my stomach, and I subconsciously quickened my steps. There wasn't a soul behind me, yet I kept glancing over my back shoulder, convinced I'd see someone gaining momentum on me. The only sound was the soft thud of my flip-flops as they struck my soles. I was flooded with relief as I flung open my door, but it didn't last long. Everything was exactly as I left it, except the silky nightgown, which was now back on my bed. Sleep came in fits and starts. I left the lamp on for a while, still convinced my roommate would be right back, but the shadows it cast made the room even spookier. It was too dark with the light off. I'd finally slipped into a deep sleep when I suddenly heard the door open. A man stood in the darkened doorway, showing just enough for me to see his contorted face.
I need to. You have to help me.
He sobbed, too confused and disoriented to be scared. I sat up, scrubbed my eyes, and reached for the lamp switch. But once the room was lit, I saw that the door was closed. There was no man. I quickly bounded off the bed and went for the door. It was locked. Nobody could have entered without a key, and the hallway empty. I passed the rest of the night fully clothed, sitting up in bed, and with the light on. Though I paid for 2 more nights, at 7 a.m. I gathered all of my stuff and went down to the reception desk to check out. By the way, I said to the 20-something receptionist, my roommate never returned. I'm a bit concerned. She picked up the room key, looked at it hard, frowned, and then glanced at her computer. What room were you in again? When I repeated it to her, she looked back at her screen. Ma'am, that room's been empty for 3 weeks, and it's been cleaned since then. We only have 6 people in the entire building. The hostel has since been renovated and is now a luxury hotel. I realize that we didn't physically meet, but I thought it relevant since I seem to have met someone. Someone entered and left my room.